You do the crime, then you do the time. Seems like enough punishment for criminals found guilty in the courtroom. You're on a family trip, and being the kid in the back seat, looking at the highway stretch, to watch people wearing orange jumpsuits along the road doing the job you don't really understand. I was also that kid who didn't understand. While humans just like me were working in over 100-degree weather, mowing lawns, pulling weeds out the ground, and even holding a weed eater for 8, maybe over 12 hours. My name is NIA DAVIS, and I am a convicted felon in the state of Georgia whose scenario became reality when life took a turn for me, as I was sent to work at the Department of Corrections prison work camp at the age of 19 for supposed servitude to the country, not slavery. But it was a lie that I found out the hard way. The disregard of human rights violated by penal labor upon incarcerated workers in the prison system is a true problem that the government has evolved slavery into a lawfully protected gold mine. Where does change start? Within the prison facilities. Does it start when the government strips away the necessities of a healthy labor environment? That becomes dangerous or violent for incarcerated workers. Does it start with the ill-paid wages exploited from incarcerated workers? Items made in the United States government factories. Does it start with the 13th Amendment of penal labor forcing incarcerated workers to do manual labor as punishment for a crime? The next change needed is the establishment of a fair and equal treatment of human rights for incarcerated workers in prison, starting with the government acknowledging moral wellness in a healthier prison environment, supportive mental counseling, and incarceration release rehabilitation. Penal labor is the root of the problem of human rights violation upon incarcerated workers because it was established to end involuntary servitude, even though the 13th Amendment of penal labor originated from slavery. Penal labor was ratified in the year of 1865 during the term of President Andrew Johnson, who didn't establish support or disagreement for a penal labor system, although Johnson did favor black codes against the freedom of freed African American slaves. The article Prison Labor is Human Rights Abuse, written by Naomi Corlett, explains to readers what has happened since the beginning of time when ownership of many slaves evolved into ownership of prisoners in today's time. Corlett states that the United States also exploits prisoners for the labor, again mirroring the ways in which African Americans were exploited under slavery. The recognition of how the choices or options for manual labor isn't a choice for incarcerated workers, because the 13th Amendment of penal labor makes labor required. To this day, prisoners in America are forced to work against their will in jobs they do not want, which by definition is involuntary servitude or slavery. Corlett states, on August 22, 1958, John F. Kennedy, at the time was senator, working on passing the Labor Management Reform Bill for 1959 through the Senate and Congress, but didn't have any luck. Kennedy's political stance opposed forced labor practices and advocated for humane treatment of prisoners, which would include not supporting penal labor systems. Naomi Corlett is a junior, graduating in the class of 2025 from Chicago, Illinois in Winthrop, studying government issues and also reaching towards strengthening collaborations between institutes of politics groups across Harvard's campus. Corlett studies at the Institute of Politics at Harvard's Kennedy School. The Institute of Politics was established in 1966 as a memorial to President John F. Kennedy and shares the engagement from student activists such as academic politicians to inspire careers in politics and public service. There is truth to both arguments, stated by senior investigator Alexia Fernandez-Campbell. The article, The Federal Government Markets Prison Labor to Businesses as the Best Kept Secret, written by Alexia Fernandez-Campbell, highlights the importance of prison labor being a gold mine for the government as another economic business with a consistent profit. That is, developing growth as a never-ending cycle. Campbell has also previously worked as a staff writer for the Vox, the Atlantic, National Journal, and the South Florida Sun-Sentinel. Vox was founded in 2014. It was animated by a simple observation. The media did a good job of reporting the news and commenting on it, but there was a disconnect between the work and the audience truly understanding why something happened. The Vox goal to ensure that everyone, regardless of income or status, can access accurate information that empowers them. Campbell states from her article that the 3 key selling points for hiring prisoners to do this work: it provides businesses with a skilled workforce, low labor rates, and nationwide locations. Incarcerated workers are forced to work in manual labor at major government-owned institutions such as agricultural, assembly manufacturing, and prison industrial complex that partner businesses benefit from. The journey of UNICOR began on June 23, 1934, when President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed the law establishing Federal Prison Industries, which is a corporation that sells goods and services made by inmates. UNICOR was established to bring job training opportunities, but ensuring the corporation remains financially self-sustaining, with emphasis on the government's only acknowledgement is the funds. Most of the UNICOR's customers are the federal agencies, but the programs also sells millions of dollars worth of goods and services to private companies that can't find workers or plan to outsource jobs overseas, stated by Campbell in her article report. Even though Campbell agrees that prison industry is problematic, she says that the answer could simply be increasing wages without bankrupting prison industries. These are more costs associated with running a prison factory than any other prison factory, they say, as they have to make sure there are armed guard security measures in place. But the federal government has already shown that it is possible to pay prisoners regular wages without putting prisons in dire financial straits, Campbell states. So what makes this problematic if there is an answer? Violence, danger, and even overcrowding in prisons are other contributions to the unhealthy environment that incarcerated workers live through as punishment for the actions they've committed. But it doesn't make it right by any means when manual labor is rewarded with death or injuries. Ideas are the beginning of forming the next change seen as impossible or especially unrealistic, but the ACLU defies all those odds. A small group of idealists took a stand against the government January 19, 1920, and has grown into the nation's premier defender of the rights enshrined in the U.S. Constitution, known as the American Civil Liberties today. The ACLU has a written labor search report titled Capital Labor Exploited of Incarcerated Workers, detailing the labor actions taking place in prisons and answers to establish better alternatives for incarcerated workers. The ACLU has joined forces with the NAACP, Japanese Americans, equal treatment to lesbians and gay men as well. The ACLU continues to fight government abuse and to vigorously defend individual freedoms, including speech and religion, and a woman's right to choose, and the right to due process, citizens' right to privacy, and much more. The ACLU stands up for these rights even when the cause is unpopular, and sometimes when nobody else will. The ACLU is committed to fight for freedom and the protection of constitutional rights for generations to come. Incarceration is more for violent and dangerous punishment than it is for rehabilitation or education after freedom. After years of toiling and low-wage, undervalued work, people leaving prison continue to carry the weight of incarceration, stated by the ACLU. The aftermath of violence when incarcerated workers are exploited causes traumatic PTSD that after affects the thoughts, actions, and emotions. Mistakes doesn't define a person when there is change that can happen with the right rehabilitated corrections and the healthy and safe environment needed to do so. The ACLU states that to amend federal and state laws to ensure that incarcerated workers enjoy the standard labor protections available to other workers in the United States with regard to minimum wages, overtime pay, health and safety standards, and unionization and collective bargaining, and protection from discrimination and retaliation, among other protections. Incarcerated workers today take on a duty not earned or given, but instead required by them to do so with no choice of safety, health, and attentiveness in those conditions. Does it make it right to lack those responsibilities of a human life? Yale is a leader in higher education and one of the richest universities in the world. And Decker is one out of the 13 black men to graduate from the School of Arts and Science at Yale University. Decker published an article titled Time to Reckon with Prison Labor through Yale's Institute for Social and Policy Studies to highlight that mass imprisonment helps supply more workers for the government prison industries. The ISPS was founded in the year of 1968 to establish a database for sharing and archiving knowledge from experiments and other data-driven social science research. This wage need not to be the same level in prison as it would be outside, stated by Charles Decker. The commitment to gain workers from a place of violent ownership established consistent work for private companies, state, and even the high-ranking federal government. Incarcerated workers won't complain about the wages because regular workers' wages aren't enough for them. The psychological mindset of using human work ethics to satisfy the government economical need for greed is wrong, and it should be equal wage. since there is an equal amount of work being done to get the same amount in profit for prison industrial companies. In 1979, Congress created the Prison Industries Enhancement Certification Program, PICEP, to protect the right of goods made by prisoners to be banned from interstate transport unless inmates are paid wages comparable to those in the private sector, stated by Charles Decker in his article. The government created prison labor to receive the profit from the items made in prison industries and continues to fail when it comes to establishing the laws protecting prisoner wages as well. Incarcerated workers' labor compared to the work of non-incarcerated laborers is the same as slavery was in the past, when racism began being perceived as black slaves taking the jobs of the quote-unquote true poor Americans. Just to see, it was just ownership, not choices. The United States of America has created a legal form of human trafficking, with the incarceration industry bringing in $80 billion profit every year, but lacking in fair wages, healthy environments, and mental rehabilitation. There are over 870,000 inmates working full-time in American prisons, with the median wage in state and federal prisons around 20 and 31 cents an hour. Slavery, black codes, Jim Crow, and more laws have targeted mass incarceration policies to have led more people of color with no protections in the laws for freedom. In rural states like Texas, Georgia, and Arkansas, prisoners are forced to work for free and are not considered employees under the law. The incarceration industry stretches from jail to prison throughout the whole nation. And if things don't change for the better, life for the incarcerated will become a massacre. The need to be an instantaneous resolvement for fair and equal treatment of human rights for incarcerated workers in prison begins with the government making arrangements for healthier prisoner environments, supportive mental counseling, and incarceration release rehabilitation systems. Change for the human rights of incarcerated workers doesn't start in the past with slavery or the promises for equality from the governments today. Change starts now.